Hey everybody, welcome back to Fantasy Theory. Today we are breaking down, reviewing, and looking at Easter eggs you missed in Marvel's What If Season 2, Episode 5, titled What If Captain Carter Fought the Hydra Stomper. This episode was my favorite of the season so far, mainly because it was very much inspired by Captain America the Winter Soldier, which is one of my favorite movies in the MCU. It also takes some inspiration from Black Widow's movie, so expect that. This episode picks up from the last episode of Season 1, the after credit scene when Captain Carter met up with Black Widow after defeating Ultron. They both see the Hydra Stomper who has Steve Rogers in it, so I believe this is the Captain Carter in the scene from all the Season 1 episodes. The episode begins in the Battle of New York with Captain Carter, Black Widow, Hawkeye, Iron Man, Thor, and a weird one, Wasp. Not going to lie, this is like the B team of Avengers. The Watcher mentions that he doesn't usually do sequels, not usually. So we know this is a sequel to that Captain Carter we followed in Season 1. In this group, it seems the leaders are more of Captain Carter and a little bit of Black Widow, instead of Iron Man and Captain America. They both have a close friendship, it seems. Peggy uses her shield to save Natasha from bullets, just like Steve did in Avengers 1, also using the shield to launch Natasha up onto one of the ships they are fighting, just like Steve did in Avengers 1 to Natasha as well. Captain Carter's suit looks similar to Cap's suit in Avengers 1, but I feel as if it resembles more of the suit from Age of Ultron. In this timeline, Black Widow and Captain Carter are the ones to take out Loki, and then we cut to the Watcher. The Watcher goes on to say not every timeline has a Captain Carter, the hero of World War II, the women quite literally ahead of her time, which is true because in World War II, I don't believe women were prevalent in the war, so to see her is inspiring. In some of the shards of glass, we see Frost Giant Loki, Natasha, looks like Peggy's eyes, Thanos, Supreme Strange, Iron Man, and some other ones I can't really make out. Let me know if you can make it out in the comments. We also get Gamora, I assume, from the last episode, the Wasp, and I believe Clint. Now, this Captain Carter is not in the original timeline, I don't believe. Not gonna lie, it's pretty confusing, but I'm pretty sure this is a new one. The original timeline being her timeline. So we start this Winter Soldier vibe the same way we started the Winter Soldier movie, only it's a little different. Instead of Steve running in DC, we see Black Widow running, and instead of Black Widow picking Steve up in the nice car, it's Peggy Carter. I wonder why they didn't just switch Captain America's place with Peggy's, but instead made Peggy more like induced in this new life. Perhaps because Peggy wasn't frozen in ice like Steve was for so long, so with all the parallels to the Winter Soldier, there are some differences. We see Peggy and Natasha on a mission that takes place on a ship, only they are looking for the Hydra Stomper instead of rescuing hostages like in the Winter Soldier. Peggy appears to be wearing almost the same exact stealth suit Steve wore in the movie, which is one of my favorite suits, might I add. Also want to point out that they are on the same page here, unlike Steve and Natasha were in the Winter Soldier. Perhaps this duo trusts each other much more. The Hydra Stomper attacks them as they try and figure out why Steve is in there. Natasha references RoboCop, and Peggy isn't familiar to that movie, kind of like how Steve was in Winter Soldier when he had a list of things of what to catch up on. In the timeline, Steve is basically Bucky, Peggy is Steve, Natasha is Natasha, and kind of Bucky is like a Peggy, if that makes sense. Nick Fury is also in this, and he is basically himself, and explains to Peggy that Steve and Bucky became a two-man army that wiped out all Hydra bases until Steve was killed on the last one, or assumes killed like how Bucky was in the MCU timeline. Bucky is introduced, only he's in more of a senator role now, much older, because well, he never got the super soldier serum. You can make the argument he took the role of Alexander Pierce, but I think it's more of a hybrid. Pierce, if you don't remember, was the senator commander friend who was friends with Fury, who will ultimately betray all of them and be part of Hydra. We even get a cameo from Crossbones as he tries to help Bucky from an attacking Hydra Stomper. I wonder if this universe Hydra is still in the shadows or if they are completely wiped out here. In this attack, we see the suit has the red stars on it like Bucky's arm did, his metal arm, the number 88 on it, as well as having red eyes to signify its evil. Unlike when he was working with Peggy, he had blue eyes. He also seems to never run out of bullets when he's the bad guy, just wanted to point that out. When the Sokovia Accords are brought up, Bucky said he's not trying to start a civil war because they didn't do the right thing, which of course must be a reference to Captain America Civil War that started because of the Accords, and it is also another one of my favorite MCU movies. The Accords, of course, was a way to make the government take control of the Avengers, and Steve was not for it. If you couldn't really tell, the Captain America character is my favorite superhero and my favorite movies of the MCU. At least my favorite trilogy. I want to point out that Peggy, Bucky, and Crossbones are all voiced by their MCU actor or actress, which I love to see, or I guess hear. Bucky stands between Steve and Natasha, who is locked onto him to save Steve. It's weird because Bucky isn't really going to bat like Steve did for him, but I guess with how their roles are switched up, Peggy will go to bat for him much more. Bucky says Steve would be stupid enough to do the same thing for him, and I love that line because that's 100% true. Bucky almost breaks through to Steve until Peggy ends up saving the day and fights the Stomper. As they fight, the Stomper ascends through the building, breaking all floors until the roof, and Captain Carter uses the shield to shield their impact for both her and Steve as they go through each floor. The Stomper suit shuts down, and she ends up guiding the suit into kind of a queen jet that Natasha is flying, and she ends up bringing them to an undisclosed location in Scotland that the shield does not know about, and they end up breaking through to Steve for a little bit. Like Tony in some way, the suit is keeping Steve alive, but also killing him. Peggy references that Steve is frozen and in carbonite, which of course is from Star Wars, which was on Steve's list in The Winter Soldier, so at least she got to see the original trilogy. Also, she says he is frozen, and while Steve can just not catch a break with being frozen in some way. It seems like every timeline he is frozen in some way. Black Widow brings up the Red Room, who will ultimately be behind this instead of Hydra, and is where the Black Widow movie is from. In this universe, Natasha killed the leader of the Red Room, unlike she did in 616 timeline. I do wonder if she has the same family and sister like in the MCU. When Steve comes back, he says how he owed Peggy a date, and that's like their thing now that they always say. Unfortunately, when things aren't looking good for the two, they usually say it then. They go into a weird town with robotic mannequins, in which kind of reminds me of the weird Florence Pugh and Harry Styles movie called Don't Worry Darling, but also that Call of Duty map Nuketown for all my COD fans out there. As they walk through the town, I want to point out that Hydra Stomper is still red, so that could be foreshadowing what's happening. As Steve and Peggy share a romantic moment, we hear the classic "It's Been a Long, Long Time" plays, and the song is definitely their song, so it's pretty fitting to play here. The scene is cut short by the Widow, Zapper, and they take on all the mannequins until it's too much for Steve, Captain Carter, and Black Widow. The Red Room that flies appears, and we meet the leader of Melina, who is voiced by the actress who plays her in Black Widow, who in this story is also Natasha's fake mother. Steve is brainwashed back to the enemy side, and we find out that Melina wanted to lure them to her so she can either study, kiss, or take out Captain Carter. The Widows chase Natasha, where we get an awesome kind of shot of reminiscent of the Avengers a few episodes ago in the Happy Hogan Christmas one, as well as the Age of Ultron one, where it's that slow-mo shot of the whole team coming from the left to the right of the screen. Reminiscent of Steve and Bucky in the Winter Soldier movie, Peggy stops fighting Steve and throws down her shield, and Steve snaps back into it. Steve ends up flying himself through the Red Room, destroying it and bringing it crashing down. Nat and Peggy get out of there, and then we cut to them deciding to go and look for him. But out of nowhere, even to the Watcher's surprise, what the hell is this? Peggy Carter is taken by some red magic, which we see is what I assume to be the 1602 episode, and we see the Scarlet Witch voiced by Elizabeth Olsen, where if you watch the opening credits, you would have noticed that her name is there, but thankfully I usually skip it, so I had no clue. Quick backstory, 1602 was a comic run played out similar to where they got Peggy Carter's help to save the Queen. So I wonder if they will follow the same story or what. But anyway, by far my favorite episode, at least from season 2, but you let me know what you guys think. I had a lot of fun diving deeper into this episode, and it seems that the team is just starting up for the final few episodes maybe. Thanks again for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next one. Have an incredible day.